My name is Kaylee, and today we're going to be doing an unscripted video. This is for a class called Biology in the Age of Technology, and today I wanted to go over a concept that I thought of a while ago because I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy XIV. That's my dog. I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy XIV, and in it, there's actually a really robust species categorization system. And in real life, we have the same thing where you use Greek names and what's called phylogeny, which is the organization of species based on relatedness. And it's really complicated. We used to do it just based on purely physiological expression. So that was the time when whales were fish, right? Because a whale looks like that, and a fish looks like that. So it's pretty easy to tell these look similar, they might be related. But eventually, we went into more DNA-based comparisons between species. So now we can look at a whale, which looks kind of like this, right? There's a little dolphin. And be like, actually, this isn't a fish at all. This is most closely related to the odd-toed ungulates, the artiodactyls, which is hippos. Let's draw a little hippo. There's a little hippo. So that's hippos and horses. So let's do a little horse. There's my horse. Beautiful horse. These are all really closely related, as opposed to a fish, which, as we know now, is really, really, really basal. And it honestly depends on what kind of fish, because you have fish that go into amphibians, like frogs, and those amphibians eventually evolved into a whole bunch of other species. So, as we know, whales are not related to fish at all. Well, they are, because everything, is a chordate. To define that term, a chordate is any four-limbed animal, tetrapod, right? That has what's called a notochord. This is very basic. I can't even say mammal, because it's also fish, it's also birds, it's also reptiles and all that. Oh, I forgot the reptile. There's a reptile there, and then it turns into a mammal. But it's anything with a spinal cord, basically, is a chordate. But there are chordates that don't have spinal cords. They're called tunicates. And they look kind of like this. I think you can catch them in Animal Crossing. Let me check really quick. Haha, yeah! So in Animal Crossing New Horizons, you can catch the sea pineapple, which is a tunicate, which is one of these guys, right? Which kind of looks like a fish. And then they eventually, as they develop, they lose all of their internal structure and turn into one of these. That's the basic concept. With all of that priming out of the way about how you determine relatedness between species, I thought it would be really interesting to try and do this for Final Fantasy XIV, specifically with their dragons, because I haven't quadruple checked how true this is, mostly because I don't want to get spoiled. But my dear friend, who's played a lot of the game, told me that on Hydaelyn, right, or beautiful in Eorzea, whatever, right, the dragons are aliens from space. They are not, there's Frostfelger. They're not endemic to the planet at all. So they came from space, and colonized the planet, specifically in Dravania. And what also came with them, besides just the dragons, were dinosaurs. Right? And I thought, so on this planet, which very realistically has like giant snakes and stuff like that, the things that have come from space to colonize it are not like, I don't know, like little actual alien looking dudes or whatever. Oh, that looks horrifying. Little aliens, right? It's not any of those guys. It's dragons and dinosaurs. So today I thought it might be fun to do a little like hypothetical evolutionary tree. Like, how could you connect a dinosaur and a dragon together? Because despite both being giant scary lizards, dinosaur or Tyrannus, I think dinosaur literally means terrible lizard. They don't have that much in common. So what would a hypothetical, like, ancestral species look like? I thought that would be a fun little thought experiment to do. So the real question when we begin like this is, where do we start? Unlike dinosaurs, which are, as we mentioned earlier, they're chordates, and all chordates are also, or most chordates are tetrapods. So they have 4 limbs, right? We look at a dinosaur, right? There's a little T-Rex. He's got a big head and little arms, but he has 2 of them. Like, this is 4 limbs. That's our dinosaur with 4 limbs. Dragons. Let's draw a little Hresvelger. Right? There he is with his little arms and his little legs. Pointedly do not have 4 limbs. That's 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How do you get here? Like, where is that connection point? Is it, in this hypothetical, is it more or less likely that these species would gain an extra limb? Or is it more likely that they would lose a set of limbs? That's the issue that we're having here. I think, personally, it's more likely, based on, and just as a reference, for anything I'm talking about, I am going to have a list of sources in the description of this video if you want to double check anything I've said. Like I said earlier, this is unscripted. This is the only video I'm doing that's unscripted, so it's a little harder for me to double check my facts while I'm like actively recording. But anyway, it's really hard to gain a new set of limbs. Most of the time it happens in frogs, more than it happens in like other species, to my memory of my frog pathology class. Mostly because frogs are more basal. To my understanding, frogs are more basal than most other chordates. So the like gene information required for them to develop a limb is a little bit more lenient than something like a dog, right? Most of the time, if a dog comes out with 2 legs, it's like fine, but it's probably got some other congenital issue that's not going to make it through. But frogs, they get affected by pollution really easily because it gets into their skin and messes with their genes a little bit more malleably. So usually when you have something develop a new leg, it's a frog, right? And it's usually either from, so this is the like shoulder joint, it'll usually develop from the same joint, or it's like a wrist and you've developed a new hand. It's not usually something like a whole new limb, right? Evolving in a whole new place. That's kind of crazy. But something that can happen is like vestigial limbs. Limbs that only occur in utero before completely disappearing. We're going to loop back to our previous example of the dolphin. Or like, would you believe I got a degree in marine biology? These dolphins are coming out horribly. So we have a dolphin, right? And as previously established, dolphins used to be like hippos or horses. They're missing a whole set of limbs that they lost so that they could be more hydrodynamic. So where did this set of limbs go? When they develop as babies, there's this, maybe if I find the footage, I'll put it over this. This is it's stuck in my mind. I was going to say famous, but I don't think it's famous. I think I'm just weird. There's this footage of like a baby dolphin developing, and like for a split second, they develop this extra set of limbs. And so the limbs pop out, right? You get a whole leg, and then immediately after, in like the next maybe month of gestation, the limb goes away. And then it eventually, when it's born, it's just a normal little dolphin. So that's definitely something that could happen for one of these kinds of species. So what I think is more likely is that you had an alien planet that had dragons, right? And some of them, especially considering that dragons in Final Fantasy are like capable of complex thought and speech, like you can talk to Hresvelger and be like, "Hey dude, can you please help us defeat your evil brother?" And then he gets all mad about it, right? Like this is a cross-species interaction that you can have with Hresvelger. But all of the dinosaurs we see in the game, right? Like the guy in the boss in Som All, he just kind of goes, "Rawr, I'm a scary dinosaur." Casts big scary tail slam on you, right? Like, that's really the only thing that we got. So the dinosaurs, let me not rattle my chair. The dinosaurs really only have 4 limbs, and they don't have that high of a capability for complex thought. So obviously they've lost a couple traits on the switch from dragon to dinosaur. All right. So with all of this established, right, where we've got like dragons on one end, dinosaurs on the other, where is our hypothetical evolutionary lineage? Because something we also learn in the games is that the dragons have parthenogenesis. The word is parthenogenesis. Within a lot of dragon species that we can see, there seems to be a prevalence of parthenogenesis. Because I don't think, like specifically with Hresvelger, right? Mr. Grandpa. We don't see his wife. We see Shiva, right? Who is like a normal Elizin, a normal human woman, and they're in love. And we know that Hresvelger has a daughter in Vidofnir, right? Vidofnir. We know that her dad is Hresvelger. But her mom's not Shiva. Like, this is not happening. So Hresvelger parthenogenesis Vidofnir into existence. That's something we can speculate on. To my knowledge, I haven't Googled. This is just based on my experience playing the games. But we do know that dragons are capable of sexual reproduction because we have Nidhogg, a big angry dragon, and his wife Tiamat, big angry dragon. And they have a whole bunch of children, and those are like, that's Nidhogg's horde, right? Like that. That's all the, like, evil dragons that you fight in the Horde for, like, the entire game. Most of them are spawns of Nidhogg and Tiamat, right? So the dragons are clearly capable of both. So that's a trait that we also have to keep in mind. Okay. With all that out of the way, right? Let's make a tree. I'm going to start with my hypothetical is that we start with someone like Hresbelger. Right? I think he's pretty basal. And then off of him, we get things like the Dragonlings. Slash Nidhogg, they are brothers. Right, so we get stuff like the Dragonlings. I'd say off of them is probably stuff like the Pucks that we see all the time. Those are allegedly dragons. We also have, probably off of the Dragonlings is something like the Drakes that we see in-game, which kind of look like this. Right? They've got the same basic body shape as a lot of the dragons, but they can't fly. So this is the first, I would say this is probably the first stage of reduced presentation of that extra set of limbs. We also have stuff like, and I'd say probably off of the Drakes is where we have stuff like, what is it? Archaeornis, stuff like the Archosaurs. Probably even something like the Stegosaurus. And the Pisaka. I'm getting all of these, by the way, from the Final Fantasy console wiki, which has a great repertoire of like all of the different species in the game. But these are just literally, these are theropods, right? Like that is an existing group of dinosaurs, is the theropods. I'd also say that let me move these guys over. The like raptors that we see in game, they're also called like velociraptors sometimes. There's some in Outer Lenosia. Those also, I think, are very comfortably theropods. They've got the same basic body structure. They've got the 4 limbs. They're even kind of birdy. That's very theropod. Oh, also off of them is probably stuff like the Ziz. That's pretty theropod. Pretty bird theropod to me. Also, obviously, the Tyrannosaur, which is literally a theropod. Like, that's real. And then kind of in a similarly related group, but maybe branched off slightly beforehand, I would put all of, like, the crocodilians. Like our Stegosaurus. Oh. I already wrote that down. Look at that. I'd put these guys over here. Oops. Probably also with Sarcosuchus, which is real, by the way. That's another real thing. Maybe even like the weird feral croc things that we see in Kurthus. Those I would all probably put right here, like off of Drake's. As a different evolutionary line from the Dragonlings that we see. So, Puck, also a Tarok. Those go over here. They look the same. I think in this same general group, I'll put the cliff kite. They've got very similar body structures. I would say probably this transition point right here into things that are very certainly theropods, I would say that is the vinegaroon. Like, exactly. Where it's still very dragony, but it's like on its way in. And then over here, I'll put what is categorized as a Draco. So this is what I would kind of classify as like the general, this is our general progression for how we go from a dragon all the way down to a dinosaur in a way that sort of makes sense. To put this in a little bit of a better perspective, we're going to do some little doodles. So up here, we have our basal Hraesvelgr with his big old wings and his 4 legs and his little horns. There's Hraesvelgr. A prototypical, more dragony. There we go. That's a little bit better. Could also probably even put like Bahamut up here. Anyway, we start with Hraesvelgr, right? And then eventually to adapt to life on Eorzea, where there's less food to support like a giant species like Hraesvelgr. They eventually like consolidate their body shapes. Get a little bit smaller, a little bit longer neck, bigger wings proportional to their bodies. There's a little dragon, right? This would be like our step down. Just air quote step down. So this would be like dragonlings. Smaller size. This would be our dragonlings, cliff kites, stuff like that. And then off of them, some of them consolidate even more to get even smaller. And those evolve into like the pucks. Or the Pterox. Ooh, I should write that clearer. Pterox. Some of them may even consolidate in a different way. And lose their front limbs entirely. Some of the dragons in this game, instead of losing the wings, they lose their front limbs, right? Oh, that kind of looks... That's like some of the Dracos, right? Are up here. So these are our possible paths. We size down from Hraesvelgr, right? Size down from Hraesvelgr, and then we have to size down again because there's not enough space for like this many large dragons. How do they proliferate? Some of them just get even smaller. Some of them start losing their limbs. One set loses front limbs, go on to be the Dracos. Another set goes on to lose the wings. That evolves into the Vinegaroon. It still retains... They've got the crazy tails. Yeah. Like, they look like extra nasty. Vinegaroon. So they, instead of losing their front limbs like these guys did, they lost the wings. And instead evolved to be like completely terrestrial. And then off of them, we eventually get a normal, modern-day identified Tyrannosaur. Or, like, as we would identify. Oh, look, he's got a little smile. We got our T-Rex. And then, eventually, the T-Rex, one of their lineages, goes on to evolve into one of the raptors. With, like, the bird beaks, right? And, like... And one of them, these guys comes off. Oh, let me draw a better arrow. And potentially evolves into like the Ziz. There. Oh, that's what I was missing. Their little display crests. Big backs and all of that. Yeah. And these guys have lost even more limbs. They've decided they don't need any. They just need their display crests. And they'll hit you with their nose. So, like, from this we can kind of see the, like, simplification of species over time. Where, as they integrate more with Eorzea, they're leaving behind all of these traits that made them probably really well suited to whatever planet they previously lived on, and instead eventually go all the way down to adapting to something that suits Eorzea better on a much smaller scale. And it's worth noting that these guys are the ones that still have, I believe, maybe these guys are the ones that still have like full sentience compared to like these guys don't really have a concept of like personhood. But a lot of these guys will, especially these ones. These ones certainly do. Bigger Gap is kind of debatable. But these guys are pointedly worshippers of Bahamut. And are like the reason why the 7th Umbral Calamity like occurs in the first place is because of these guys worshipping Bahamut the whole time. So even though these species have adapted to life on Eorzea, they have in the process lost their capability for sapience. They can't conceptualize as much. I think that's really interesting. Because it kind of implies that their assimilation into the planet has upsides and downsides. Where like now they can fully have food, and like participate in the ecosystem, but they can't necessarily reach those same like social heights that they used to. And I think it's really cool. And I think Final Fantasy does a really good job of like showing something like this and being able to display a clear through line that like works. Like this makes sense, I think. Versus like some family trees in certain games, which I won't name, that don't have that kind of inherent coherence. Yeah, I think that's all I got. So thank you for watching, and if you want to check out some of the other videos I've made for this project, they're a little bit more well put together, go ahead and click the cards at the end of the video, and remember all sources for anything I've said will be in the description, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye!